Hi, guys. Welcome to Abuse Recovery Success. I'm really excited for today's episode. One, because I haven't been in the studio for a minute, so I've been missing this interaction. But two, because of the guests that we have today. We have Megan with us, who you're going to get to know here in a little bit. But I'm really excited for her story because it's a little bit different from some of the guests that I've had in the past. And I think it's going to relate a lot for a lot of the listeners that lately have been calling, emailing, and kind of expressing some of the hardships they're going through. So really, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Megan. Megan is a singer-songwriter, but not only does she do that in her spare time, she's also a business owner. And I think she just started training or recently got into that. But she's going to tell us more. And first, introduce yourself, Megan. Welcome to Abuse Recovery Success.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, April, first of all, for allowing me this opportunity. It's actually kind of funny, guys. I have a music Instagram for my songwriting and singing, and then a motivational one. And you would think that she would have found me on my motivational Instagram, but she actually found me on my music one, which was really cool, but also really crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, a quick introduction of me. Yeah, I'm actually working to become an ASM personal trainer. I'm going to be an elite trainer eventually, which means I'll be able to help with nutrition, corrective exercises, weight loss, all kinds of stuff. I did this because I believe that fitness is a part of mental health. And this is the part of me that does life coaching. And on the motivational Instagram, it's kind of its own business as well as my other business. My other business is called Neuropolitan. Neuropolitan is a small branding agency, and I have a lovely team of people that work with me there. I couldn't be more proud of how that's going right now, but that is that. And then I also am, like I said, a singer-songwriter. I really love what I do. I'm actually working on an album related to abuse recovery, so I'm super excited about that. But that's a very basic introduction. I do have a husky who is laying right here. You can't see her, but she's right here.
I love it.
And a bird that is in the other room. So yeah.
That's cute. So speaking of birds, I actually had a family of birds nesting in my courtyard, and I've seen the whole process of these birds evolving, and they're getting ready to fly away, and I think I've become attached. But Megan, tell us a little bit about, well, first let me say I love hearing that excitement and just how alive you are and the passion dripping from you in many different areas. And I think anyone listening right now probably can hear and feel that. But what I'd like to have you do is tell us a little bit about your upbringing or what brought you to this point where you are in such a great place or working through a lot.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to actually start with recently because you're saying, I'm in a good mood. And so I've done speaking events, things like that. And I'm able to be like this because of that. I know how to talk to people in that sense, but I mean, this past week has been tough. And I knew we were going to get into that anyway. So something in my recovery and I have done this since I was younger, but I don't know if you're aware that you'll repeat trauma cycles, right? And I'll get into what happened when I was younger in a moment. But recently I completed a trauma cycle that I'm diagnosed with CPTSD. So that means that basically my brain was wired in a different way, right? So anyone dealing with that, it's not easy, and it's not just something that military people go through, but that's still terrible. I mean, it's valid for everyone. We all go through it in a different way. But that can make it difficult with connecting with people, having fully positive relationships all the time, because you get triggered by certain things. And then you suddenly start getting a little paranoid. You start thinking different things. And if you don't yet know what's going on, or you don't have an action plan or a support system, that can be very difficult. Okay. So my point with that was that I can be going through a really tough time and still look like I'm in a really good place.
Yeah.
And people tend to actually think that I didn't come from my upbringing because of that, but we can get into that later. I did read some of your questions, and I know you were talking about the stigma, and we can get back to that when we talk about that. But as far as my upbringing goes, so, oh my goodness, this is crazy. So the post that April found was one that I said I had to leave my family. So excuse me if I stutter a little bit with this. This is the first time I will be telling this at all in a detailed way.
Sure.
Anywhere. But I actually had to completely stop talking to my family about 2 years ago. So it's going on 3 Christmases now. And the reason for this, and I actually have to say, just a little side note, if you do have PTSD, if you do have any of a personality disorder, anything from the abuse that you went through, I think you should thank yourself a little bit, because without that, I would not have left, because I was so frightened for my life that I realized I should leave. Right. So with me, I was adopted from Moscow, Russia at 2 years old. And there's that, but I was obviously very young. And I ended up into a family, and I'm not going to obviously name names or anything like that, with my abuser, who was my father. And I don't call him that anymore. I call him by his name typically, but again, that's not the point here. He was never formally diagnosed, but when I really look at it, and I actually have a neuropsychology degree, so I really started to kind of dig into it. Be careful diagnosing yourselves, guys.
Yeah.
But in terms of the symptoms and kind of what he was like, he was a malignant narcissist. And what a malignant narcissist is somebody who's not only narcissistic, so they are actually very insecure with themselves, but what they're going to do is they're going to be very grandiose about it. They're going to think they deserve everything. They're going to get supply. Very, very quick version of this. There's a narcissistic cycle. It's kind of a buzzword right now to say narcissism, but in terms of a real narcissist, the cycle is usually, so the love bombing stage, then you have devaluation, and then the stages that I actually experienced. So it would be love bombing, devaluation, and then there was this period usually of depression as well, from my abuser. He would get just really quiet with everyone. And I still don't completely understand what that was all about, but I'm starting to realize that trying to analyze every little bit of why he did what he did really doesn't help the situation. And I'm saying that for all of you as well who are trying to heal. It's hard not to, but so he would actually, it was kind of like living in a cult. And even now talking to you, it sometimes can feel like you're an imposter trying to tell the story. Like, am I telling the truth? Did it really happen this way?
I feel the exact same way so much. So know that I'm here right now in this moment with you, and you, that's exactly how it feels.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I didn't get a chance to actually look into your story, April. I apologize. I didn't.
Oh, it's okay.
I didn't think about it until today, and I was like, I should probably have looked into that, huh?
No, but go on. What you're saying and doing is helping others, so tell us.
Of course. So, no, my father, my abuser, would physically abuse my brother very often, almost every day. I mean, school nights, we'd sometimes be up until 2 or 3 in the morning. It was really quite bad. One of my first memories, I was actually 2, and I remember seeing that happen. I was confused. When I was a 2-year-old, I didn't really know what was happening. And I still barely remember it. I just know that something bad was happening. It wasn't until I was 3 years old that I remember thinking I might die here. And I didn't really know what to do. I just remember thinking that. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm too young. Somehow I knew that I was too young to get out of the situation. I don't know how I knew these things. Maybe just I understood, but didn't know how, because you're 3. Like, you know, I don't know if that makes sense. If you have memories from being that young, which I don't have too many, but growing up, I kind of had to go into a denial state. And that I will get into in a moment, because I'm learning more and more about how my body chose to cope in my brain, which now creates some issues in, you know, my connecting with others and things like that. But I'm also breaking that, which is really exciting to talk about, a good part of it.
Yeah.
So there was that physical abuse portion. Because my body decided to deal with my personal abuse by, you know, dissociation, some, you know, amnesia type stuff, I don't remember a lot of the physical. I know some things happened to me like that, but not that much. It was more so my brother. I actually have some other potential things that might have happened to me that I don't fully remember as well, but I can't really speak on them because I don't fully remember. What I can say is there was definitely emotional incest. I don't know. Are you aware? I'm assuming you're aware of all of the terminology. But just, I guess, for the viewers, a very quick thing. Emotional incest is not like sexual incest, although it can have that in it. What it basically is when usually a narcissist will do this, will, for lack of better words, groom you to replace their spouse, but they're not
Mm.
actually doing that. What it is they're putting you in the place of their spouse. So they're talking about their spouse to you. I'm the child. Saying, "Oh, your mother's so bad. She's a bad person. One day you'll find out how bad she is, and you'll come back to me and you'll tell me how right I was." Things like that. When you don't really need to get involved. I used to feel at fault for that because I would get involved with them, and I didn't realize until very recently, actually, that wasn't my fault, and that was something that I was taught to do. There were some sexual comments made towards me when I was younger that were not appropriate. And more things come up in that regard that are not comfortable. But it was just really not a fun place to live. I mean, the cycle that I experienced, so we would go through a period of really good things. So my abuser would be in a really happy mood. He'd be buying us all things. If you actually see me, a lot of people don't think that I went through that because I have so many nice things. I have so many, if you look at us from the outside, we looked like a perfect family. The careers that my family had, all of it, we looked very perfect. But the reality is, I was given financial things, I was given material things, and I'm thankful for that. But, I was brought to the US. I couldn't be more thankful for that. But I wasn't given, and we weren't given, something that actually mattered and allowed us to grow into the people that we really needed to be. And that goes for, my mother, my brother, and myself as well. Oh my goodness, where did I go?
Well,
so sometimes when I tell the story, I'll start forgetting stuff.
I
Forgive
feel
me.
like the biggest thing comes to mind that you didn't have was safety,
Not at all.
And even in therapy, I've had my therapist tell me, like, your home is supposed to be where you go to be safe, to breathe, to be okay, and to have people there to support you. So, while our brain searches for positive and it's always good to be that way, like, someone providing you material things and then destroying you from the inside out is not okay, and nothing
It is
we say can
definitely
ever
not.
be okay. And I want to say that because for the listener that is in their room somewhere scared, enduring things, I don't want them to feel, because I think you and I both share this, is guilt. Because we always feel like there's something wrong with us. We had some part in it. We should be this, we should be that. So I don't want to get lost in that. But what I do want to know is for you, like, what was the relationships like in that house with you and your mother, with you and your brother? And tell us more about that, I guess, before we kind of move on to now.
Of course. Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot to go over. So the way that the system of my family worked, and I think that'll be helpful to explain. They have, the scapegoat, they have the golden child. I was typically the golden child, but it did switch. So it could switch. And sometimes my mom was the golden child, which is even weirder. So it would go between all three of us. He would kind of triangulate, who was he going to abuse today? Me, my mom, or him? My brother, my abuser created a story around my brother that he was scary. He actually told me, "Oh, Jacob might," I remember he told me one time that he might actually hurt me. He was like, "Oh, your brother might actually hurt you." And I remember going to bed actually scared. I was probably, oh my goodness, was it middle school or was it elementary school? Either way, I would stay up at night and I would think, what was I going to do if someone came into my room and tried to kill me? And I would stay up as long as I could with my light on reading because I was that frightened of what was going to happen to me. And then I'd go to school the next morning and I would get bullied at school. So I'm actually very impressed that I am still alive.
I know.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But my relationship with my brother, it could have been better, but because of that sever that was put between us, I never was 100% sure about him because he had his own issues as well. I did try to help him through a lot of the things that he was going through. Obviously, that was kind of difficult. But yeah, that was definitely kind of severed. And the more I look at it now, the more I realize how much that was persisted by my abuser. My relationship with my mother, I used to think that it was very positive. So And I think it had its positive moments, but obviously she is also in that cycle too. I actually remember I'm the one who first came to her and said, "Hey, something's a little off about dad a little bit." And she said, "Oh, he might be bipolar or something." She's like, "He's fine, don't worry about it." And as I got older and started saying, "No, mom, I really think something's wrong," she started getting upset that I was, trying to bring attention to the situation. And part of the reason I'm, nervous today is because obviously this is public, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they hear about this, then
Now, do you still have any contact with them in the mom?
no, I don't.
Mm.
Definitely not. But that doesn't mean
Yeah, there's
people can't,
pipeline of people.
and it's even, and it's even scarier too, or just kind of sad because narcissists especially, they're going to lie, and what is it called, the
Gaslighting, deflecting.
no, after you leave they'll do a thing, they'll I'm trying to remember what it is. They try to pretend that you are what you aren't. They try to talk badly about you and make you sound like, yeah. So my abuser is, telling people that he's still financially helping me and all of these things, which are not true at all. And it's, yeah, I mean, I'm not telling people this story to out anybody. I'm just telling people because if you are in this situation, it seems like it's hopeless. It really does. I mean, I was suicidal 3 times in my life.
It's dark and it's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's dark and it's scary. So absolutely you would feel that way. I mean, I feel it in my heart right now listening to you, but go on.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate you so much. But I would say, I had to stop talking to my mother last year, or earlier this year, actually. Oh my goodness. Because she is still in the mindset where she thinks I still need to talk to my abuser. She's like, "Oh, you need to talk to him. He loves you. He cares about you." No, he doesn't care about you either.
Yeah.
But I also have come to understand that I cannot control what other people do. I can only do what is best for me and to heal and become the best person I can be. So if I have a family one day, I can give them a healthy life.
Yeah. I love that you said that because that's what it's all about, is being able to break the chains and the patterns of these kind of dark childhood experiences that some of us have gone through, because it can be such a cycle and so repetitive. Will you tell the listeners a little bit about really, like, I guess the thought process you started to have when you knew like you needed to start breaking away from this family? What inspired it?
Okay, so this is interesting. It Okay, so this is where I'm going to actually talk a little bit about dissociation and how my brain decided to handle things. So I'm still kind of figuring this out. I have a therapist, and definitely I recommend, guys, if you're going through something like this, get a trauma-informed therapist. It really helps. But there's a spectrum of dissociation. So like I said, you're either driving and you forget where you're at, you're driving to your work. Totally normal, very common to have that, right? And then there's, of course, dissociative identity disorder, which is over on the other end, which was formerly called multiple personality. So when you have CPTSD, you're often in the middle, and that's where I sit. So it means that you will dissociate, and sometimes you will not remember something about a situation, which happens to me more than I more so with romantic relationships, friendships, deep, close relationships, mostly. And it can be really terrifying. So my reason for saying that with your question is because my brain compartmentalized my trauma for so long. So there was a part of me that knew about the trauma and a part of me that didn't. And the part that didn't was the part that got me through there. But once I went to college, I got to see what normal kind of was like. One thing I didn't mention, but I'll tell you now because it was just so creepy. My abuser would come into my room throughout my life. I think when I was young up to when I was older, and just stand there. This was so creepy. No expression, and just tell me how bad of a person I was, but quietly, it was the weirdest. I still think about it now and I'm like, am I scared or weirded out by this? Because it was a lot. But anyway, things like that, of course, my brain just didn't focus on. It was like, what I did was I focused on who I liked at school. I focused on crushes. Oh my God, I like this guy. When really what was happening was my brain had to focus on something else than what was happening. But as I went to college, that started to break just a little bit, but not enough to be, huge. But it did break enough for me to actually start seeing the CPTSD a lot more. What actually happened was I watched a Criminal Minds episode one day. I was home actually, so in my family's home, and there was a rape in the show, and it triggered me actually. And it was the weirdest. It was the first time as an adult that I had been triggered by my CPTSD episodes. And it was very terrifying because I felt like I wanted to hurt someone else. And I realized later that it was more of a trapped feeling than anything else. But once after that, it started kind of over the years getting worse and worse and worse, especially when I was around my abuser. And finally, I started just feeling plain unsafe around them because I started having, dreams and obsessive thought processes that told me that something else might have happened to me that I don't remember. And I just felt this fear around this person. So I decided that I needed to start getting out. Now, the way that I did that was playing the long game. I was planning to get out even in high school. I remember even when I was suicidal and I would talk to God and be like, please keep me alive. I was really holding on to, whatever I could to make sure I could get through it because I knew eventually it would get better. And guys, it does get better. It doesn't seem like it, but it can. It definitely can. Where was I? I was at a point.
No, you were saying that you started having these thoughts about playing the long game in high school, but you also go from there.
Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So playing the long game. So I already kind of had this idea, but I didn't really solidify doing it until after my master's degree. So I have a master's in entrepreneurship. And after I got that degree, I was living in where I live now. And I decided that I was going to have a plan. And I did have friends support me during this time. So I want listeners to understand that definitely isolation is going to be the enemy of your healing. You need to have a support system, even if it's one person. You can do it on your own. I'm pretty sure you can. But for me, having a support system was helpful. Okay. So I took about a year to set everything up. I decided to getting a new phone. How was I going to do that? I was also set up by my family to be very financially dependent on them. So that was very difficult. I'm still getting out of that mindset today. That was very hard. So I was figuring out how am I going to get the right job to make sure that I can handle this. I got to make sure these bank accounts are covered. I got to make sure I had a whole list of everything that I was doing. And they ended up visiting me. And what I was going to do was actually ask for a break because I was still too scared to really leave. And I figured maybe if I just ask for a break, they'll get that they need to chill, But when I asked for a break, they just said, oh, you don't want to be part of the family anymore. And I was like, well, I guess not, kind of thing. And of course, I definitely was not happy about it, but it was an interesting moment. So after that, I just blocked my abuser, and then it was kind of crazy. I ended up having a conversation with my mom as well the day after that, and she was not happy. It was a lot of words were said, a lot of hurtful things, a lot of interesting things that were not necessarily good, but it is what it is. But I will also say that the good part about leaving was that it was so nice to realize that I didn't have to listen to my abuser anymore. Sorry, I'm so used to saying his name to my friends when I do talk about things. I didn't have to hear from him anymore. Like radio silence. And that was so different from anything I had ever experienced that I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So at first I was very much at peace with that. Having Christmas alone with no one else, I was actually really happy about that, which is something you wouldn't really expect. Mm-hmm. The difficult part about leaving is so when you have a schema of your life, you tend to think this is how my life is going to be. I never thought that I would be without my family, ever. My mindset was, things will get better, like a movie, right? Yeah. Things will improve. It'll be better. Then things will be fine. So leaving went very much against this schema in my mind that I had created. So that was, I think, the hardest part. And I think up until this year, I was still having a hard time and wanting to go back. And for the viewers that listen, if you do leave your family, leave your ex, whoever it might be, it's pretty normal to feel like you want to go back. but you definitely shouldn't.
Yeah, I relate a lot to that. I don't speak to either my mother or my father. I'm estranged from them, and I had to block my mom. And honestly, it is a very freeing thing. I think it's a painful thing, and I think you're newer into it, and at the end of the day, we have our moments where it does feel lonely not to have a family. But I always say to people, like, you don't have to be in these unhealthy binded relationships. You don't have to be somebody else's prey or a victim anymore. And I think it takes a lot of courage and strength to go, like, carve your own way. And especially, like, at the end of the day, you were adopted into a family, and that was, in a way, second family, although it's all that you knew. And to have to walk away from that isn't easy. But tell the listeners a little bit about, okay, so you kind of make this decision, and you have this conversation with them, and tell them about maybe some of the positive. Like you said, that Christmas it was almost odd to feel like kind of okay about your decisions. But tell them about the ebb and flow of that time right after or following.
Definitely. So that was kind of interesting. I think at first I was in a state of shock. So I didn't really feel the upsetness of any of it. I felt just very at peace because Christmas happened right after. Because this was around Thanksgiving that I left. So it was kind of interesting because I didn't block my mom at that point. So she was still kind of talking to me because I figured maybe I could still make that work because I don't consider her my abuser, but she definitely had, played a part in certain parts of that. So she had sent me gifts and things like that, even though, he wasn't supposed to know about it. She's like, Dad doesn't know, so don't tell him. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna, of course I'm not going to. Yeah. But being alone and being able to just kind of hang out was a kind of peace I hadn't known before. And it really shut down the anxieties that I was feeling I felt safer immediately, even though after a little bit, I ended up starting to worry that, he was going to come find me or something was going to happen. So I definitely had moments of paranoia. And lucky enough was able to live with one of my close friends the year following. And so he being there for me, my friend, was definitely a big help because living with another man made me feel like I was going to be safe. Because even though this is crazy, even though my father was my abuser, I also felt safe when he was in the house. Like, oh, no one else is going to hurt me, even if he does. It's a really interesting kind of mindset. So having my friend there was very helpful. But during that time, I did end up on a low last year, not just because of COVID. Everyone was talking about that, but I started going to therapy more, and I started realizing or remembering a lot of the trauma, including some of the more disturbing things that might have gone on that I'm still not 100% sure of. I just decided to let my brain deal with that on its own time. It'll tell me when it's ready. Yeah. But it was definitely dark because I tried to go through EMDR and tried to heal quickly because for me, I was worried that I'd be 50 years old and not healed yet. And I'm 25 now. But it was, I think, a little bit too difficult because it pushed me into a very difficult state. I mean, I felt like I wanted to throw up. I was depressed. I was eating binge eating again. Yeah. I binge ate when I was younger. So it really wasn't very good. And I just realized that maybe trying to tackle the really difficult stuff wasn't a good idea right out of the gate.
So smart. So wise.
Thank you. I had to go through some things to get there to that point. So there was that. And then now I actually live with my other friend as well. I'm still friends with the other person. And I'm in a better place now generally, but what's really interesting about that. So for the viewers, you are going to go through an ebb and flow of the healing. It's not going to be just, oh, you're really good all the time or really bad all the time. I think what really shook me though, is I told you that this week was kind of crazy. It's because, like I said, I just came out of I don't completely know exactly what happened, but I'm thinking it was a trauma reenactment that my brain kind of just started to get triggered and decided to create things or extrapolate things that weren't actually happening with a connection that I have. And it was kind of destructive in certain ways, not horribly, but enough to be embarrassing and enough to be like, what just happened? But what was weird about that was I'm in a good place right now. So even if you are in a good place, you still might get triggered by something and not realize it. Because usually when I have those cyclic problems, it's when I'm in a darker place. So that was very interesting for me to experience.
Yeah, I have to say something because I can't even believe that you're saying half the things you're saying because I have had the same week. I have had the same week. And it's funny because, later I'm going to record a solo, and I was going to talk a lot about triggers and things like that. And I just want you to know that I absolutely feel that same way. And I was saying I had a tough week and things came out that I wasn't prepared to listen to or hear that triggered me. And I stayed home yesterday. I did. And that's what I think. I love how you started this episode talking to people about like that ability to turn it on. And that you're not just always okay at all. And, I've always been really good at turning things on and turning them off. And I think it's a survival technique. I also have I talk a lot in some of my other episodes about that PTSD that you're talking about. I had my brain studied, strapped to different things where they said you just react differently. Your brain is wired differently. So I have different reactions to things that other people don't, and things affect me in a different way. And again, what you said in the beginning for the listeners, like, whether I do this podcast and I have businesses and I'm doing all these things, and yes, I live most of my life in light, but things happen to me and I fall and I have a bad day. I eat too much and get, cry and overreact on someone because of 5 other things that happened. And sometimes I have moments where, I have to come into the studio and I have to dig really deep from in here, and I don't feel like coming. I mean, I'll be honest, I feel like I want to curl up in a ball just because I think, because, I noticed a few times in the episode you talked about, like, the beginning stages or healing. Like, at the end of the day, healing from severe trauma in early childhood is like an onion of layers and layers of layers. And just when you think you've got it, just when you think you've figured it out, and you're like, I'm kind of like a regular person right now, I'm not dysfunctional. Then boom, then you're like, oh my God. And then you got to just like kind of try to start all over again. But it's right?
Oh my goodness. I feel like a normal person for a second, and then it hits you and you're like, oh no, darn it.
I messed up. But
oh man.
I mean, I think that's why I wanted to make this podcast and cultivate the support in the group and have what we have, because I wanted, hearing from you right now has given me so much strength right now. Just hearing a little bit of your story. I mean it. And then I feel like I can get through tomorrow and the next day because look at all you've overcome. And I think that's what this does for the listeners. So I guess tell us, like, so you go through all this and all the burden of trying to break the chains, get out, get away, create a new normal, facilitate living arrangements that you can be able to sleep a little bit at night. How do you start making all this progress that you've made in your life with business? Tell the listener who's thinking like, okay, maybe I can be lucky enough to get away or to heal a little bit, but how? Maybe their abuser told them they never amount to anything. Maybe they told them all those horrible things. How can that person, from what you're saying today, how did you go out and create a life?
Okay. So a couple of things kind of stood out to me with that, but I'll answer your question first. I think because of the way my brain decided to handle my trauma with, being in denial about certain things. And that means, and I just so you know, actually, I wanted to bring attention to this too. Something really interesting about my healing that I've noticed, that denial. So the denial I was in growing up was like a big wall, like a glass wall in front of me. And that was the reality my abuser created, what I thought was real. And I've noticed recently that I'll have these little cracks in that wall, and I'm starting to see real reality as for what it is, but it's not everything yet. And it's interesting to see that break. But my point with that is with that dissociation, with all of that, I was able to create a persona. And I would even say, Megankay is my handle, Megankay Motivate, Megankay Music. That is what I created. I created the me that works out, the me that goes into business, the me that, sings. And I'm not going to lie to you, when I was younger and being bullied and going through all of this, I said, I want to be as normal as possible. And so I created a persona that was as normal as possible. And as I got older, I did start to kind of think, okay, is this really me? And I kind of started to go through that maybe like last year-ish, like what's really actually myself and what isn't. And I think that's going to be a lifelong thing.
It is.
Continually
I hate to tell you it is. I've always tried to figure out if I'm really me.
Yeah, am I really here? Yeah. But I would say that is why I was able to do that. But I will tell you, if you're having a really hard time, so last year I couldn't even get out of bed. You can ask my friend. This was so bad that I was somebody who could get up at 6 a.m. and go exercise. And then, I did really well. When I was 21, I was very healthy because I was eating really well. I was in a good place. Right. And that's pretty normal for me. I'm usually able to get myself up, but I could not get myself up. I would sleep in really late. I would do these things. And so much so that my friend didn't believe me when I told him that I could get up early and do things. But at this point, I think it's a good thing to point out that you can either change a belief and then it changes your behavior, or you can change your behavior and then it changes your belief.
Love
right?
it.
So for me, a lot of times I have to change my behavior first. Now, what I would recommend to anyone that feels like they can't do anything, don't try to make yourself do everything, because that is not going to work. Make one thing on your list. If you have trouble showering every day, I think you need to go take a shower. And that's it. That's all you got to do. It's one thing. And eventually you can slowly start to add more things. But what I do recommend is definitely looking into making sure the foods you're eating are how they're affecting your body and your brain. Because for me, I can get affected very easily by different foods in negative ways and positive ways. And I do recommend activity, exercise. It doesn't have to be lifting weights. It can be whatever you want, but it just has to be something that gets you moving. Maybe going outside. A lot of these things are, they help depressive episodes and things like that. But I definitely recommend that. In my heart, one of my hardest times, I know you wrote what was one of my low points when I was in high school, between 14 and 17. I don't remember how old I was. I remember I was really suicidal, and it was funny because I was suicidal about the fact that I thought I was overweight, and I didn't think about, because I remember it was all compartmentalized. I didn't realize I was being abused. I just thought, I'm fat. I hate being fat. I want to die. And I remember I had eaten a whole pack of Oreos. And I sat there and I said, I really want to kill myself. But then there's another part of me, again, compartmentalized in different parts of myself, that said, you know what? I'm going to make a deal with you. If you can try one more time to get healthier and to lose weight and to get into a better place, then we'll let you live. But if you can't, then I'll let you do whatever you want. Pretty much. And it was kind of funny because then another part of me was knowledgeably knowing that if I let myself go and be healthier and try to make healthier choices, that I was going to get better and that I was going to live. So that is why I'm here today. So that was a very dark spot, but I am able to kind of do that. So with my business, I started my business in a good place during my master's. I was in a very good place. And there have been times where I have gone in and out of thinking my business is legitimate, thinking it's good, thinking it's something I should be doing. I mean, I go in and out of that all the time. But I think having the place I'm at now, having my support system has really helped. So my team being there and doing the great job that they do. Thank you guys. If you're listening to this, really helps out there. If you have not started a business yet, so if you're going through a really hard time, you want to start something, just do one thing at a time, just one thing. And start trying to show yourself compassion. Find one thing that makes you happy. When you are depressed, it is very hard to find that. That could be as easy as walking outside. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, but if you can at least start a snowball effect of taking care of yourself to an extent, you should be able to get one thing done, and then two things, and then three. But then showing yourself that grace as it's happening, because it's not going to be perfect.
I agree. And I think the one step at a time is really how we do a lot of things. You might know that I also, speak a lot on addiction. And
Yes, ma'am.
And for that, one day at a time, one small step is all we really have. And I think, you and I have had such an organic conversation. We probably won't get to all the questions, but one thing I want to talk about before our time is up is tell us a little bit about who you are today, and you're this business owner, you do all these things, you're in music, but how do you go about helping others? What is your motivation there? Because I know the motivational stuff. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Of course, yeah. So part of what I do is mini blogging. So I guess I don't know if I'd be classified as a micro influencer on Instagram, but basically that's kind of what I do. So if you go to my Motivate Instagram, you'll see that most of my blogs are all about healing from trauma, different experiences. I only recently started talking about my personal experience. A lot of it's scientific. I had a domestic abuse set that I talked about, with helplines, things like that. So that's kind of one of the ways that I do it. I also talk about, body positivity in terms of, not, hating yourself for what you look like, and just kind of, it's a little kind of everything, encompassing everything. But I also am a life coach. I was doing more coaching before, but since, getting out of my situation, I wanted to give myself some time. So I do life coaching for narcissistic abuse healers, people who want to heal from that. I do speaking events. I actually was going to do quite a few in 2020, but obviously 2020 happened and then I didn't. Things like this. So, I talk about my experience, and I'm starting to kind of come out there, and I'm looking for more opportunities to do that. So I can talk to that 15-year-old that is with their family and thinking, how am I going to get out of here? I've had kids message me on my Instagram and say, I saw you do this. Can you help me? And I can't always, give them the answers, but I can kind of give them what I know and guide them to a good place with that. And then of course I'm adding my NASM certifications to that once I end up getting those. So it's really my entire life. I mean, my music is even going to revolve around that, being able to help people heal and recover. So everything I do pretty much has, in a way, goes back to that. Yeah.
I love that. It's a really beautiful thing. And even what you've done today on this episode with sharing your story has been tremendously helpful to just me alone. And I needed it more than you can possibly know. And I think this is going to give a lot of great impact to the listeners. So before we part ways today, I'd like to ask you to just share all of your social media handles, any way that anyone that was moved by this episode can find you.
Of course. Yeah. So my Instagrams, I have two of them. One of them is going to be Megankay Music. So that'll be MEGANKAYMUSIK. That is where I'm going to put all my songs and things like that. And then I have Megankay Motivate. So again, MEGANKAY and then Motivate. I am on Spotify as well as Megankay. And I do have a Patreon for my music page as well, but I have a whole a link tree on both accounts. So those are the two you can find me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Megan. And for everybody out there, for my listeners, thanks for joining us for another amazing episode. How you can find us is at abuserecoverysuccess.com. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok at April_the_Hills. You can find our episodes on YouTube as well under April Hill. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. And thanks again, Megan.
Thank you so much, April. Have a great day.